thanks to the University of Wolverhampton, who are helping us to host this webinar today. So, welcome. I'm going to hand over to start off with to Adam Vasco, one of my colleagues at the university, to introduce himself, and then we'll hear from Ian.
Okay, thank you, Mel, and hi everybody. I'm really pleased you can join us this afternoon. So my name's Adam. My job title is Director of Diversity and Inclusion at the university, and of course that means we are really interested in how we can support both all our students and staff to excel, essentially. I work quite closely with Mel, who has a key role in terms of our co-chair of our Disabled Staff Network. Obviously, it's Disability History Month at the moment, so really excited to be here today and listen and learn some lessons, I think, and some ways forward potentially from lessons in sport and judo, who we have a really strong relationship with. And so seamlessly, Mel, I'm going to do it for you. I'm going to hand over to the star of the show, which isn't Mel or me. It's definitely Ian Johns from British Judo. So, Ian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi guys. I'm just so we're all clear, I'm not the star of the show. I really am not. Judo is okay. So apologies if my light goes off. I might have to stand back up. I'm in the accommodation blocks in Walsall. What do you call it, campus. So if the lights go off, they're on an automatic thing, so you might see me stand up and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I'm Ian Johns. I am the Paralympic head coach based here at the National Training Centre. I've got two jobs actually. I'm the Paralympic head coach and I'm the Olympic development coach for men. So my job's split like down the middle, I would say. But I've been the Paralympic coach now for 10 years. I was the best in the price range, so that's how it came about. I mean, a bit of background about myself. I'm from Scunthorpe. I'm not from Walsall or Wolverhampton. I'm not from around this way on. I was a bang average judo fighter. I fought for GB for a good number of years, 10 years. Tried my best to qualify for the Olympics. Didn't quite make it. Give it a really good shot, but just didn't quite get there. I was a steel worker the whole time I was doing that. If you come from Scunthorpe, then you're probably going to be a steel worker at some point in your life. But I was a steel worker. I got injured, snapped my ACL around about 2011, which then that ended my career as somebody who wanted to go to an Olympic Games. I still carried on doing judo. I fought on the Masters circuit, the veteran circuit, ended up being 3 times British veteran champion and Commonwealth tournament champion, something like that. But in that whole period of time, I decided I wanted to stay in sport. Wasn't sure how to stay in sport. So I went to university, did a coaching and education degree. Scraped by with that because my whole life I've not really devoted my time to learning, education, all that kind of stuff. And then I completed a SCIT, which is a school-centered initial teacher training program. So qualified to be a PE teacher. The day I qualified to be a PE teacher, I got a phone call from British Judo saying, we've got an interesting opportunity for you if you're available. So, and that's how I started. So I basically I finished my qualification in June 2014, July 2014. I started here at the National Training Centre working with the Paralympic team. So yeah, I've been here a long time. My kids have watched me grow up and become a national judo coach. And I've been to 3 Paralympic Games now. Is that enough?
That was great. Yeah. I mean, this is going to be really easy for me and Adam, certainly. Right. Yeah. No, fantastic, Ian. Thank you. That provides a bit of context about your experience and the position from which you're able to talk about the topic today. So as Adam outlined, it is Disability History Month. And I work in the School of Sport here at the university. And that's how I know Ian, having done research with some of the Paralympic guys in the past. And therefore, I'm familiar with the culture within the programme, and I've spoken to athletes about that culture and became very aware that it's quite unique in the way in which the programme runs. And there are lessons that can be learned from judo that could be applied within business or wider society in respect of championing disabled people. just to provide you with a little bit of context within society at the moment, about 22% of the working age adult population have a disability. And yet when we look at disability employment, there's a real difference. There's a disability employment gap. So around 47.2% of disabled people are in employment, but that compares to 79.2% of non-disabled people. And there's a pay gap between disabled and non-disabled. So those with a disability earn £1.56 per hour less. This speaks of the discrimination, the prejudice, the oppression that can exist towards disability. And I think that one of the things we want to do within Disability History Month, not least because it's looking at employment and livelihoods, is to shine a light on practices that are really positive and that set an example to businesses. And the organisational culture that exists in judo is one such example. So I'm going to start off by asking Ian if he can provide a bit of an insight into how the programme is organised on our Walsall campus, because it's unusual for elite sport programmes to be integrated, but that is the case here within judo. So perhaps, Ian, you could just provide a little bit of information around how the programme is organised.
Yeah, I think so. After the London Games, what happened was basically a whole host of different sports were asked to centralise, and we went through a tender process, went through all different types of universities, where to go. We had to share the facility with so many different places. And we got this opportunity here also. The University of Wolverhampton gave us an opportunity. It's our place. We put our own stamp on the place. We have a gym on site. We have medical facility. We have a fantastic dojo with everything that we need in there for the purposes of doing judo. But straight after the games, we had to set up this program, and within that we essentially made our junior team all form here at the National Training Centre to give them the opportunity to have full resources of an S&C coach, performance analysis, physio, full-time coaching staff, and all this kind of stuff. So, and what happened then is that some of the older fighters, some of the ones more established in their clubs, and they could stay in their clubs. The junior fighters that were reasonably successful, no, very successful, not reasonably, a very successful junior program. All the fighters came here to the National Training Centre. As a part of that, the Paralympic, we had some Paralympic potential fighters that were in our England pathways, and British Judo have always had a very strong Paralympic team since it started in 1988. With the medals from like Simon Jackson and people like that. Our Paralympic program has been superb, and it's mostly because of the work done by the coaches. Steve Pullen, he's like, I consider him the godfather of like VI judo, and I spoke to him. I seen him in Paris this year. It was fantastic to see him. But like, because of his work, getting all the Paralympic team into one place, to train in Manchester and all that kind of stuff, it really helped us to do this. And we seized upon an opportunity because we had two fighters that were in the program, in the England program at the time, and we basically give them a room here on site, and they trained with the team as well. So, and then they had a full-time development coach working with them, and yeah, essentially they're together. So the best thing that we could do is pull that resource together. It means that the Paralympic team get their own dedicated coach. This guy, they get all the other advantages that Olympic athletes get. They get everything that they could possibly get. They get full-time programs. They get full-time, so we can go away training camps. We can go away do this. They get kit. They get everything that possibly that they could wish for to become elite performers. Now that started way back before I even came into power, shall we say. The coaches were like, okay, so if they're going to go, if the Olympic team are going to go to Austria to a training camp, then so are the Paralympic team. If the Olympic team are going to get snazzy Adidas kit, then the Paralympic team are going to get that. So I think like those things have always been started in motion. I've just been able to take the baton and continue that going, if that makes sense. But yeah, the program that we have here is the, I mean, we call it the National Training Centre. It's the Olympic and Paralympic Training Centre, and it has been since the day we've opened it. So
yeah, and I think it's, you know, that's quite unique actually within elite sport to have integrated programs. We do see it in some of the other sports like cycling as well, but a lot of the time Paralympic athletes train in isolation. They don't train with an Olympic equivalent.
it's the envy of the world. I try, like, centralization is difficult for the rest of the country. It's difficult because everybody wants their slice of the cake almost, and they want to be able to the dream of taking their athlete to an Olympics or a Paralympics, and centralization kind of takes that away a little bit. In the fact that I mean, us as coaches here, we view the club coaches and all the clubs that these fighters come from. We view them as very high level, but it's not always. They don't always feel the kudos, and that they feel that people are taking them away from that. But when we go out into the world of judo, the Paralympic program, since the day I started, some of the nations couldn't believe that we go to a world championships and we take an analyst, a full-time physio. The performance director came. Our chief executive at the time, or our chairman came. They came to the event, and some of these nations are like, they're just working out clubs. They literally are just working out clubs. So then they couldn't believe that we have all this support wrapped around them. And now it's not as uncommon because a lot of nations have seen the advantage of putting the Paralympic team with the Olympic team. So or putting the Paralympic team with a junior team, or putting the Paralympic team with at least an elite performing environment.
Yeah. Excuse me. Certainly in the past, I know that there's been talk about Paralympic athletes sometimes feeling they get like a Cinderella service compared to Olympians, that they're not taken as seriously, they don't get so much resource and financial support. If somebody were to walk into the dojo or the Centre of Excellence, can you paint a picture in terms of what a training session, what a randori might look like in terms of the makeup of the individuals in that session, and also kind of how athletes are treated, how the VI athletes are treated, for example?
Yeah, I mean, if I go back a step, like my first week at the National Training Centre, I'm working with two fighters. One's he's been in international competition for a while, one really hasn't. I remember sitting down with them guys, and I was like, right, I'm not visually impaired. Okay, I've got full 20/20 vision. I'm not from your world. I'm an Olympic style athlete. You need to help me a little bit. How do I need to coach you first and foremost? What is it I need to do? I've not been in this environment too many times with you. What is it you need from me? The first thing that came back from both of them is, we just want to be better than the Olympic team. Okay, good. We shook hands on it and said, fine, like no problem, because that's brilliant. That's music to my ears, because with that comes a whole host of standards. Because I know what it takes not to go to an Olympics. I tried my hardest. I give everything. My family gave everything. My wife gave everything for me to be an Olympian, and I didn't quite make it. So I know what it takes to not be an Olympian. So if you want to be better than the Olympic team, okay, the first thing you do is you wear your kit. Like, you wear your kit, and if you come into our environment, probably the Paralympic team, when they're down in the gym, they always wear the kit. When they're on the judo mat, they wear the right Adidas kit because we're sponsored by that team. When we travel away, they wear all the right stuff. So that that was the first standard that we brought in, was that, and said, okay. In the actual environment itself, they do the same training. We have a couple of bits that are really specific towards VI fighters, in like for example, if we go right into the depth of it, the muscular endurance of a VI fighter is very different, because they start on the grip, and so the lactic acid that runs through the arms is really high. On the Olympic side, it's less, because they don't start on the grip. So we have to do some specific training around that. and some specific training, a little bit more training on tactical stuff, because during the fight they can't pick up the cues as much as the Olympic guys. So we just have to do a fair amount of work on that. But it's the same sport, so like it's the same throwing techniques, it's the same like no-hazard technique, ground techniques. It's exactly the same sport. So I've just treated it from day one as if it's the same sport. I treat them, if they're late, they get the ropes the same as everybody else. If they do something really good, they get the same praise. If they do something really bad, they get the same hammering from a coach that you should get from a coach. Yeah, so I think some of our really, like, I've taken the guys up mountains in Mongolia. Like I've had them in some of the toughest judo environments in the world. When we've been to Japan and places like this, the guys have been fantastic. I've just treated them the same. Like if you want to be an elite level Paralympian, then you're gonna have to be as good as an elite level Olympian. And I think we've struck a really good balance. We struck up a really good balance of being high level Olympic, Paralympic athletes, and giving them the support, because in the environment the guys just can't see a lot. So there is nuances, like in the gym, for example, and they do fall over stuff. They do misplaced belts. They do if the lights go out a little bit, then we have to help them get around the place. But I think everybody that works within the National Training Centre are so used to working with VI athletes now that it just becomes second nature to them. So when we do have like the Italian team coming in this week, and then one of the fighters, his vision below here is terrible, so he does bump into people, and the phone's almost like, oh, like a big guy. But they soon get used to it. So, but our guys treat them as second nature. They know that sometimes they need support, sometimes they just need to get on with it. Like, and we almost have that attitude to a lot of things. You know, you're just visually impaired. I think one of the fighters, he put it, I don't even know if this is correct, politically correct, but he's like, we just can't see a lot. We haven't got bits missing, or like, you know, so we just need a bit of support with this. Our sport looks the same. We're not the highest of needs when it comes to sport. So my guys are pretty good at realizing that their vision is really bad and they need support with this kind of, but they're not the worst off in the world. They understand that.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is Adam and I both work, you know, in a higher education environment where we know about kind of how disabled people can feel that in that environment. Certainly, that's where I focus a lot of my time, my research. And we can hear a lot about how disabled people can sometimes feel they're disadvantaged within the workplace, that they can experience more barriers, more stigmatization. It can affect their ability to progress in their careers. It can affect how much time off work they need, all manner of different things. There's a whole host of different things at play that intersect and influence their experience within the workplace. What you're describing within British Judo is a very inclusive environment in which the Paralympians rub shoulders with the Olympians, and there's no difference. And I think that the culture that exists within the Centre of Excellence very much aligns with that you're an athlete, irrespective of whether you're an Olympian or a Paralympian. If I come into I'll see women fighting men, or visually impaired guys fighting sighted guys. It doesn't make any difference. The disability isn't at the forefront. It's a consideration, but it's very much about championing the person and the athlete first.
Yeah. I wouldn't say, sorry, Adam, you were going to say so. I wouldn't say that's all the way through our sport, by the way. So it's like it just so happens that our training centre is full of some very like-minded people. So we're all seem to be swimming in this direction. So towards a goal of Olympic and Paralympic success. So like, and we've had to make loads of mistakes. Like I've made loads of mistakes. I'm like I say, I'm a steelworking northerner that never worked with visually impaired people before. So like I would say sometimes come over here, and then they would say, "Where's over here? I don't know where over here is." So but it's not the same all the way through the country. And I would suggest that's not just in judo. Like if any visually impaired person or disabled person up and down the country are not always going to get the greatest of services. The fact that our guys have a dedicated guy that's in charge of that, and the rest of the staff and most of the other fighters from the Olympic program, they fully support our guys and have done for a long time. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting with that, there's lots of interesting things in there, but I think we one of the things that the themes that you picked up almost is that a quality piece almost, rather than sort of equity, in that actually because we can have an equality of experience. And what really stands out to that is maybe, so in universities, and I'm sure, well, in fact, I work lots with the NHS and education sectors and the professional practice environments. We talk a lot about reasonable adjustments. And of course, the reasonable adjustments tend to be made because the environment is not inclusive by nature. So there need to be a number of reasonable adjustments made in order to navigate the environment, because ableism really is the default, if we're being honest. I think in talking around issues to do with disability, there's a really, really incredibly long way to go, hence why we have Disability History Month, hence why we are focusing on employment. But in some of what you were explaining there is really a model for what the aim is, and I think the blueprint really for things. So yes, there are times where some adjustments need to be made, and we all are on a learning journey around our language. It's really easy to slip into things like just come over here, and actually you need to be more specific than that. That really, I understand that. But you have an environment where people are able to thrive. Yes, there might have been some small adjustments or some adjustments to the sport, as you said, in terms of maybe how you're starting off and that holding position and things around that. But actually, the environment itself being inclusive, therefore sets onto a much more even playing field, and allows for that equality of experience, which is so desperately missing. And I think actually that we talk about this affirmative model of disability, and I've heard people talk about, rather than using it disability, different abilities, and in the right environment, that's absolutely right and great. However, when we sort of take a step back, and as if we put our lens on it, Mel, of thinking about higher education and our environments, the reality is that yes, we do value, and yes, we are aiming to be able to support those different abilities, but the environment itself provides such a barrier. And I don't just mean physical environment, I'm talking about the structures, systems, it's systemic issues that we have. But it is really interesting to hear, particularly at an elite sport level, that there is a situation where equality of experience is possible, and it's really nice to hear. And it's limited, I think, to how many opportunities we see like that, and how many examples there are. So it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the affirmation model that Adam's just mentioned, you may or may not be familiar with different models of disability, and I certainly won't bore you with lots of academic jargon, but in very simple terms, disability is often problematized. It can often be, have negative connotations attached to it. And in actual fact, the affirmation model is looking at celebrating disability and recognizing that you don't need it's a non-tragic view. It's about appreciating that you can have a disability and have, a fantastic career. And I've met many disabled athletes in my time who have said the life that they're leading is so fantastic. If they could go back and change it, they wouldn't change having a disability, for example. So it's about kind of changing the discourse around what it is to be disabled. And what you're describing in terms of the culture within British Judo is very much an inclusive one, a welcoming space where athletes, irrespective of whether they are sighted or visually impaired, can look to achieve their potential. And I don't think, as Adam says, I don't think that's a given necessarily in all organisations or in society. And there are lessons that we can learn from that. How do you think, Ian, the visually impaired athletes perceive it? I mean, I know I've spoken with some of the guys and how valued they feel, but do you think this approach that you take impacts kind of, do they internalize that, and does that influence kind of how credible they feel?
If you ask Dan, one of my fighters, he'll say straight away, Johns is an arsehole to everybody. So like, and that for him that means the world to him, like, because it means I treat him exactly the same as I treat everybody else. So like, I don't treat him any differently. I think he has, like, when I hear some of the things that people say to them, like, oh, you're quite good considering, like, and Dan said that's his biggest. He hates it because you're quite good. You're an athlete. Yeah, he is a bloody athlete. He's fitter than most men I know. Like, he's fit, he's strong, he's athletic. It's just the eyes don't work very well, or like, he just can't see so much things. So, but like, it's one of his biggest bugbears is when people say, "Oh, you're strong considering, like you can't see." Well, no, my arms are huge. Like, my eyes don't work. But I think like, yeah, I try my best to be as open as I possibly can, and I don't personally have their visual impairment. Like, it doesn't mean much to me. Like, and it sounds really bad, that, but it doesn't. Like, of course, I guide them at the night time. I read the menus for them in a restaurant, or I help them check in when they can't check in for a flight abroad, or things like, I help them get partners. But like, when we get to these places and we do these things, I put the ball back on their court a little bit. In I say, right, we need to get to a certain place in Japan. Let's go. Like, Skelly, it's your job. Get us there. So now, like, as part of, I mean, judo is this anyway. Like, it's a sport, or always was a sport, built on education and it's a way of life. It's not just this. So I'm trying to help them become better human beings. Hence the reason why, when they finish doing judo, whether they be Olympians or Paralympians, they will go into the real world. They'll go back out into the real world, and they'll take stuff with them. And I think every Paralympian that I've worked with so far has gone out on to do good jobs out of, doesn't necessarily have to be in sport, but like, yeah, they go out into the real world and they go and do some real work, and use the lessons that they've learned with their time with the sport first and foremost. And then within our NTC, if they've been in that environment, and then any time that they spend with this guy. So I still end up speaking to them, the guys that have retired. I still speak to them on a regular basis about stuff. Like, I'm still their coach for life, which is normal in our sport, because I still message my coach and speak to my coach on a regular basis. Like, when I need advice, he's the guy I go to usually. So, and I think that's the beautiful thing about it, is that these guys still see me as their friend, as their coach, as their confidant, somebody they can still speak to about other aspects of their life. So, but I think whilst they're in our environment, from the boss downwards, everybody treats them the same. They don't treat them any differently, apart from the fact that they just can't see a lot.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, because I first met Ian when I was doing some research with the coaches and support staff and athletes, and we were looking at inspirational leadership and leadership in adversity, because unbeknown to us, the pandemic then happened, and we had to sort of change tact and start meeting on Teams and so on. And I think that it's really interesting to note the approach that's taken within judo, and it's very much a person first approach. They're very much a kind of family. And that sort of shines through the program, that respect, that trust, and these are some of the things that underpin effective leadership. And those things are particularly important for disabled individuals, or as important as for non-disabled individuals. That trust, that respect, that not being patronised, that being listened to, all of those things that seem really obvious but often don't happen. We know line managers are the gatekeeper to the lived experience of disabled staff, often, irrespective of where they work. And in effect, you're a bit like the line manager. And it's having those conversations. It's about setting those standards that you've spoken about a lot. You know, this expectation of where, you know, what they do, but also being realistic and at times needing to offer support. In terms of role models, one thing that kind of Adam and I look at within higher education or within our roles is kind of the diversity that exists as we go into positions of seniority. Disability is often not only underrepresented within workforces, but also within seniority, and that then limits the role models for other disabled individuals. Would you say within the sport that any of the VI guys have been role models over the last few cycles, and is that just for the Paralympic team, or is that for the wider programme?
I would say wider programme. Our Paralympics, everybody always says, I mean, they call me the supreme leader. They've got a wicked sense of humour, you know, this team. And it's all down to the fantasy football league, basically. But no, the wider program. So we have like our Paralympic program. We have our Para Potential program, which has started, really has grown from a point in time where we didn't know who was visually impaired doing judo up and down the country. And we've managed to build that up now to a reasonably good number. We have people dropping in and out of that Para Potential program, but essentially I set that up as a place for visually impaired people to drop in and drop out, to give advice to other Paralympian people doing sport. Like, you can get a free rail card if you go do this, if you do that. This is how you make a cup of tea. Put your thumb in it to make sure it's at the top of the mug. All those sorts of things. Let parents and wives and girlfriends get to talk to each other. So the same sort of people all getting together. As a byproduct of that, I thought I might find a couple of Paralympians, and like that was my intention at the beginning, was to give them a forum to be together, and then I might be able to find some Paralympians in the future. But as a byproduct of that, then you start to find role models within that group as well. So you've got people that are doing a lot of work with guide dogs, for example. You've got a lot of people that I'm not just working with visually impaired people, I'm working with deaf people as well. So then you've got parents that have gone they've lost their sight a little bit later in life, and they want to do judo. So then you've got all these are the real role models. And yeah, the visual impairment is not the limiting factor, but it's the common factor of them all. That they're visually impaired and they can't see them. So and some of the really blind people that we have, they're magnificent how they get around the country. We've got some of them that just jump on trains and they manage to get here to the National Training Centre for a weekend of training. When we have our events, they all help each other out. They you know, I think like they're the role models, but then the front facing role models, of course, like we have our elite performers like Skelly and Dan and Jack and Elliot and Evan, and some really, like, these guys do a magnificent job working in the community with people to help. They're currently doing a load of master classes, like up and down the country, going to all the different clubs and things like that. And they do a fantastic job. Like, some people question whether it's a master class. Like, yeah, it is a master class, because these are world class elite performers teaching you what they know, like teaching you how to coach people with an impairment. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a visual impairment, with world class judo knowledge. Probably some of them have better judo knowledge than I have. I'm just a little old coach from Scunthorpe, you know. So like, I think like these guys they're all role models to me. Like, but the very first thing I said when I started the job was, okay, we finished this job and you're all going to be legends. If you trust my methods of training, like, we'll finish this job with and you'll all be legends. I promise you. What you do with that afterwards, like the most important thing for any athlete is to finish and have some incredible stories. That's the first thing, right? You have some incredible stories. I climbed a mountain. It's fantastic. You know, them's the sort of stories that people can only wish and dream of. Like that is for sure. To become Paralympic champion or Paralympic medalist or world medalist or European medalist, I mean, only the top 3% of sports people ever get the chance to do that. So, and that's what I said, that we have to finish like that. So when my guys finish and they know they've given everything, I don't think I can maybe think of one athlete that I've worked with over the last 10 years that's finished and they're just done with it. Like, and then they're not happy with how they're finished, and that's it, they're finished. The rest have probably given everything that they could towards the cause, and came out with as best as what they could come out with, and finished in a happy place. So I think that's what, without digressing too much.
And Mel, I think it's really telling in that. So we know, again, thinking drawing back to us in HE, that that issue around role models is also sort of all tied in with the idea of sharing, because, as we know, not all disabilities are visible. So some disabilities are hidden, and the success of British Judo there again comes back to the environment, doesn't it? So that because it is this elite environment, this recognition of, like as you say, you are in the top percentile of people, of athletes who are ever going to compete at elite level. Because the environment allows for that, then we see role models, and actually, again, across sports, some better than others, but we can think of really great role models. Tennis is my sport, and we dominate actually currently in terms of tennis, for disability tennis. So there are really there are examples and role models, but I think when we think to that higher education piece, it's down to the environment, isn't it? Of the we know in some of the statistics that you shared, Mel, before that, and we know that the campaign that you've ran successfully to the university. I say successfully, it is successful, but the fact we need a campaign is a problem, because sharing you have a disability, if you are in a position where it is something you have to share, rather than that being visible, comes with rather than the environment, as we say in judo, where we have this completely inclusive environment, all the athletes treated the same, and you're our elite athletes. That's what draws you together. In university, that's an intersectional layer that puts on top of career progression, etc. And so it's difficult to interrupt that, where the role models are, because people are, and maybe you can speak to this, Mel, people are concerned about sharing when it is something that they want to do about disability, and that again really speaks to the ableism that permeates. I mean, I can use higher education, but let's be honest, pretty much most workplaces, workforces. So yeah, over to you, Mel.
Yeah, all I would say on this is obviously we sit in a higher education setting, but this reflects kind of wider society, in that the representation of disabled staff, for example, within higher education, is a serious underrepresentation. So if I give you an example from our university at Wolverhampton, something like 16-17% of students share a disability. So it's not that much below the national average. But for staff, we're talking about 7-8%. Share a disability. Now, I don't believe that those figures reflect reality. I think that reflects the fact that many staff don't feel that the environment is inclusive to be able to share that, and there's that kind of risk benefit analysis about, well, should I share? What is the potential cost going to be of doing that? And I think one of the things that can help with that is having individuals who are role models, who are openly disabled, and talk about that, who have been successful and who kind of pave the way, if you like, for others to do the same. Somebody like Chris Skelly really stands out, I think, here, and he's the person who, whenever I come into the centre, will actively seek me out to shake my hand. He's squinting at me from a distance, then he gets closer. I get a hug or a handshake, and a real effort always made to say hi, to say, how you're doing, and so on and so forth. But I think even before he became Paralympic champion in Tokyo, he was like that, and he was a kind of standout role model. And I can remember doing interviews where everybody spoke of him. He was the role model across the program, seemingly irrespective of the fact that he was a Paralympic athlete. That applied to the Olympians too. And absolutely, why shouldn't he be? That should be the case if he's that character. But that isn't always a given, that people are even in a position where they can be that person. And so, do you feel that actually that's had an influence on the Olympic guys in terms of their perceptions of disability and visual impairment as well? Because that's really what we need to be seeing sort of within wider society.
100%. I mean, Skelly makes me smile because he's the person I've been with the most over the years. He's the fighter that from day one. Me and him have been together, and like he's not my defining person as a coach, but he's definitely somebody who I've managed to shape into how I want a fighter to look like. An absolute beast on the mat and a gentleman off it. That's what I want him to be like, and he's a lot of his internal methods and standards are similar to mine. So I think like Skelly and the rest of the team, but like Skelly especially, he's a captain, he's a leader. He's like, you can see he's that kind of person. I'm in light. So he's that kind of person. So I think like it's I said this to him recently in a review, and I said, don't be offended, please don't be offended. But when the guy first came onto the program, he was a bit of a mess. Like he's not the fittest, he's not the strongest, he's not technically gifted. Tactically, he needed a load of work on him. But he was willing to do the work. He's like there was no talk about visual impairment. There was no talk about his deafness. There was no talk about any of them other things. He was just like, yeah, okay, what do I need to do? And he's usually first person in doing his pre-ab every single day, and that's infectious because it means everybody looks at him and thinks, oh, yeah, I've got to get on my pre-ab, so they start doing the band work and all that kind of stuff. And during the randoris, when he fights, he usually picks the best partners on the mat and goes and trains with them and does as many randoris as he can do. Excuse me. And he's usually the last person out of there. So he goes and gets his massages, and he does his post stretching, his ice bathing, and all those kinds of things. And it is infectious. Everybody takes that on and thinks, all right, Skelly's doing it, it's probably the right thing to do. And I think like a lot of our Olympic athletes have more talent in their little finger than he's ever had. But they know that if they put in the work that he puts in, then there's potentially some big gains to be made on the circuit. So I think like that's not just Skelly like that. Like the rest of the team are like that, and former fighters that I've had on the program have been exactly like that as well. People don't they go, oh yeah, he's good considering. They don't do that with Skelly because they just say, okay, he's the guy. If he's doing this, it means it's the right thing. I think he's a lot of this during lockdown, for example. Like we get the call that there's the COVID's hit the world, and we were told basically that the Paralympics are going to be cancelled, and straight away everybody's like, oh no, in my back of my mind, I was thinking, well, it gives Elliot the chance to recover because he's been injured badly, and it gives Skelly's not quite ready. There's just something missing from his game right now. And I was thinking about this, and we had our first Zoom session, and Skelly came on and said, like, right, listen, guys, I just need to say something, right? We've been given another year to get better. And like, a load of people were like, oh, behave, grow up, like, stop being that guy. But he genuinely meant it. And because he meant it, a lot of people were like, gee whiz, like, like he's right. We've got another year to get better. Like it means like all the guys that knew that they were going to go to the Paralympic Games in Tokyo, they were like, right, okay, we've got a year. We've got a year to get better. And some of the other fighters, and they really took inspiration from his attitude of like, yes, like I want to go to the Paralympic Games, but it'll still be there in a year, maybe 2 years. It'll still be there. If it gets cancelled completely, we'll be ready. And I think that's just really inspirational the way he goes about that sort of business, and not just with us, with the Para Potential team as well. He's fantastic with the next bunch of people coming in. Like if they turn up and they haven't got the right kit with them, he'll tell them. The amount of times that when I pick him up because he's from Hull, which is one of the things why I don't like him, but and I'm from Scunny, so there's a bit of. But I'd pick him up to come to the training centre to be in the wrong kit and say, no, get changed. You're not getting in my car until you get changed. Because if I've got the kit on, you've got the kit on. So that was one of the first. So now, whenever he sees the young fighters and we go away together as a team, he's the first person to say, right, you turn up 5 minutes early. You don't turn up late. Don't be late for any of the sessions. And he knows that he has to go and perform himself as well. But then on the flip side of that, he's like, no, when I've finished, you're taking over from me. So you need to make sure you have the right standards. And never wants any of that. Does his disability come into it?
Yeah, no. Well, that's exactly it. We're not here to try and say people should be a role model because they're disabled. We're saying they shouldn't not be a role model because they're disabled. Who the role models are, who the leaders are, it depends on your character. It depends on a whole host of different things. But it seems to be more rare for disabled people to be able to fulfill those roles. And actually, Chris is a really good example of absolutely why we potentially, miss out on a talent pool of individuals if we don't recognise the skills and talents that people have, irrespective of whether they're disabled or not. And I think
he's always been sorry about that, but he's always felt safe to be able to say, by the way, I can't see this. By the way, I can't do that. By the way, I need some help with this. So he's always felt safe enough to be able to do that. I mean, some of the times I throw it straight back at him and say, no, you can't. No, you can do that. You don't need me to do that. Yeah. I don't know how long. The guys have all been great at this, but I don't know how long. Maybe for the first 2 years, I would read the menu for him in a restaurant. And it wasn't until one of the other fighters said, Skelly, why don't you use your Zoom app on your phone? Like, you can read the menu yourself. You don't need Johnny to read it to you every single time. And he was like, oh yeah, I've not thought about that. I was like, are you kidding me? I've been reading this menu for him and trying to work it out in Japanese. And sometimes I just tell him, yeah, get that, or Korean or something like that. But like, yeah, they are really good at holding themselves accountable as well. But like, I need to know at the beginning what it is you need help with. And he's always felt really safe. And I think on the whole, most of the fighters that we have in the National Training Centre feel safe enough to say to me, I need support with this. Which then we don't even think twice about giving that support. Or we think, come on, you can do that. You just can't see a lot.
But Mel, that's point so comes back and circles back, doesn't it? To when your environment is truly inclusive, then yeah, there is that sort of safety, and it's really interesting because I really buy into that. I really do, and however, I also think that there has to be a pragmatic reality check for those where the invite, because generally speaking that is the exception. So that I guess as I'm listening in, I almost bristle with at the point of, we sort of treat everyone the same, and like it is incredible, and it really does show that when we have a truly inclusive environment, that's like the privilege of that situation. But the reality for most places of work, and actually, dare I say it, most sports environments as well, or certainly ones that I've been racking my brain trying to think of, it's not the default, and I think it really speaks to the fact of what is possible. And when you speak to people, and because my role is around EDI, obviously that in itself can be problematic. People are quick to label and guess what that but roles like mine exist because we do have these systemic structural barriers. But this is, and I think this is why Mel pulled the webinar together. Here is a really good example of, like you say, an environment where inclusivity it's the default, where people do feel safe and they can talk about those things. And actually, when you do level that playing field, and we use you'll all seen that image before where it differentiates between equality and it's a barrier in a sports field. Everyone's got the same thing. Equity, people have what they need. And of course, at the end of all that is liberation, and the liberation is remove all the barriers, and let's just get to the fact that actually, yes, everyone does have the same access there, and we can move from there. And it is a powerful message that is what's possible. I guess for me, I'm always just tempering it and coming back to that. For me, and we talked about role models, so we can hold that up, and certainly I will be holding British Judo up, and yourself, Ian, and the athletes, more importantly the elite athletes, not you, because you don't want to be sent to the stories, do you? Holding that up as the environment and as an example of what a good one looks like. We're both teachers, so we understand that a waggle, what a good one looks like, but also to say that, but that isn't the reality, because for the people in sectors that I'm dealing with, it's too easy to go, well, we treat everyone the same. Yeah, that only works when your environment is safe and secure and all of those things. It's a goal, but for most of our environments, we are so far away from that. But
I probably
think
need to
it's important
say
to be able to get to.
Yeah, sorry, mate. I probably need to say we're not a utopia. We're not like that. Like we still we still make a lot of mistakes. We still we regularly send out PDFs to the guys. Like their screen readers can't read PDFs. So like we're not a utopia of. We're still getting. We're still what we are is we're an environment where it's okay to them for somebody to say, by the way, the gym currently is the same color. So for somebody who is colorblind, that can't differentiate between the greys and the blacks sometimes. And so, like if you leave a black, what do you call it, bench out, one of my guys going to. That happens still. Like, so we're not a utopia of like if you were visually impaired, you won't just ghost into the place and go, wow, look at this. Like it's not that. Like it, because it's still a working environment. There's still a lot of things that we don't get right. But what we aim to do is make it as right as possible, but as most of the time. Like you know what I mean? So I think we are definitely an inclusive environment, yes, but we definitely not like we don't get everything right.
No, but I think some of that is, and number one, I don't think we ever will. There's no end of goal, unfortunately. I think it'll because everything evolves and moves and everything else. But I think really, when I talk about environment, I'm almost talking about the culture really that you've set up there, and I think that really speaks through whether there is challenge, and of course there are going to be things that we make mistakes on and things that need to be improved, and that's good, you know, that constant evolving of things. But it's the safe and secure culture, I guess, where people can authentically bring themselves. And actually, as Mel said, if again we think back to some of the statistics in the workplace generally, actually that underrepresentation, it's not that the people don't exist, particularly given, you know, that out of all the protected characteristics, being disabled or having different abilities is something that any one of us that could happen to us at any stage in our lifetime. You would therefore assume that this is a big group of people, especially at working age. And I think, you know, the government are actually actively targeting some of that in itself. But I think. So I realize it's not a utopia. So don't get me wrong, but it is a really good example of this culture to work towards. Visually impaired elite judo doing a great job.
I think, like I said, we're all everybody in the environment seems to be swimming in that direction because they all want the same thing: Olympic and Paralympic success. So all the staff want the same thing: Olympic and Paralympic success. Any success that the Olympic team get, like I celebrate as much as the guy. Any success the Paralympic team gets, like we feel that we've all had a hand in that as well. And like Skelly is the bane of my life because he asks so many questions. He wants to get everything right. But I tell you, he's not just me. He feels comfortable enough talking to the Olympic coach. He feels comfortable. If he needs something, he's really good at just like understanding, oh, Johnsy doesn't need my rubbish today. I'm going to speak to this person instead and go that way. And again, that comes from the very top. Our performance director has always said to me from day one, like he's the one that employed me. Like, okay, you treat that program like it's the best program in the world. Like it's your job to do that. And so, and that's kind of like what I've done is I've said, well, okay, that's fine. We can do that. Everybody has to be on the same page. And luckily that most of the people that have ever worked in with us have all treated the Paralympic team like the team. Like everybody says that the Paralympic team is a band of brothers, like they're a team within a team, for sure, because they all have a common goal in their own they're all visually impaired, and they're all going towards the Paralympic Games. Okay, so they're a team within a team. They help each other out. We haven't had many of them in the same weight category, so that helps a little bit. And so there's not like these massive rivalries between all the groups. We have had it, that's for sure, but they're all in the same direction, like that way. And a lot of people use the Paralympic guys as that's how we should be, that like going in the same direction.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned Nigel actually as performance director, but I think we spoke a lot during the pandemic and during research that we did around, the importance of good leadership and effective leadership. And that message does come very much from the top. Thinking about the success that you guys have had over the last 2 Paralympic cycles. Obviously, Skelly became Paralympic champion in Tokyo, and Elliot silver. And then in the most recent, in the Paris Games, obviously a bronze and a silver, another medal for Chris. So, there's been significant success. There's the proof's in the pudding, I suppose, a little bit. But what really struck me was how during Tokyo and the challenges with the COVID pandemic, a decision was made, I presume by Nigel, to have some of the Olympic guys who weren't in Tokyo, so more of the junior Olympic guys, sort of sacrifice their own training competitions in order to come into the Olympic Village with the Paralympic guys for a 6-week period to train and prepare them for the Games and be training partners for them. And I don't know that many sports that would be prepared to do that. But that speaks really of just the credibility and the significance of the Paralympians to the programme. And the same rewards given to both, irrespective of whether they're an Olympian or a Paralympian. So there's constantly this message that's delivered to the athletes around, this is an inclusive space, it's a safe space, you're valued, you're credible, and that's so significant in then translating into how they see themselves and how they push themselves and their ability to realise their potential and have those types of successes. Is there anything, kind of as we sort of come to a close, is there anything that you think is something you think that the programme can share to other businesses, or that advice you'd give to businesses or organisations that have disabled employees in order to create a similar culture to what you have?
By the way, the draw of free kit, by the way, helps a lot. Just the free kit and going to a games and stuff like that. But no, COVID times were weird times, and like I stayed here. I stayed on site. I didn't go to my family for the 4 weeks, 5 weeks before the games as well. So that was a conscious decision by all of us to do that. Nigel had played a big part in it, saying, that would be the best thing. I'm not saying you should do it, but it would be the best thing. And we all did that. And the lads that we took as training partners, they didn't even blink. They just like, yeah, no problem. That's what we need to do, because they see Skelly and the other guys as elite performers. But I think if I think of so Elliot retired after Tokyo, and he's now the coach of Australia, of the Paralympic team in Australia. So he moved over to Australia. He's now the head coach of the Paralympic program over there. So if anything, that's it. Giving my guys the power to do it. And he messaged me, rang me, he spoke to me. He was like, I can't be the Paralympic coach. I can't see the guys fighting on the mat. I said, but that's not what you need to do. And he actually can see the guys fighting, but he's got a little monocle he uses and monocular thing, and so he can watch the fights out of one eye. And I spoke to him when we were in Paris, and was like, best decision, yeah. That best decision, he said, because that means I still get to be involved in my sport. And now he's becoming a leader in the sport. And Wolverhampton have had Ben Quilter on the cards, and he's a former Paralympic medalist and world champion and all those sorts of things. So I think the sport of judo teaches you so many different lessons in itself, as one for respect and respect for everybody else, and mutual benefit. Because if I haven't got somebody to do judo with, I can't do judo. And I think just the sport itself teaches you all these kinds of lessons. And my guys are fucking competitive. They want to win at everything. When we're having our Zoom sessions, we're having lockdown quizzes and things like that, because they're so competitive. They want to win at everything. They want to, and what I've noticed is our guys are they're adaptable to every situation. Yes, But we have a one of our psychological things that we work on here at British Judo is air athletes, and that's adaptable, independent, and resilient athletes. I don't really agree with independent. I think it's accountable, in my opinion, but adaptable, accountable, resilient athletes are what we aspire to have. And that's not just in sport, that's in the real world as well, in life, because these guys have already been, in some cases, dealt some pretty tough cards to deal with. Like if you're blind, and you're deaf as well, then like, wow, the world is. I wish this light would sort of stuff.
Really keeping me entertained, to be honest.
But I just have to keep waving my hands at it. Yeah, so like they've already been dealt some pretty tough cards, but they would never see that as themselves as being tough cards. They just see them as like a bit of a hurdle, a bit of a. So like if I was to have an employment drive of people working, I wouldn't even think twice about if I had somebody who was a Paralympian. I know they're going to give everything. I know that like the fighters themselves here sometimes feel that they probably don't belong here because it's an Olympic environment. They sometimes feel that themselves, not because anybody else gives them that feeling that they don't belong here because it's tough and they're overstretching every single day. But then when they step out into their world of Paralympic fighters, they know that they're equipped to go and do the work. You know, like I say, our guys, whenever we go abroad, one of my favourite things is when I watch the draw and I watch people looking at the draw, and a British guy comes out and they go, "Oh no," because I don't want to be drawn against a Brit. Like, and I think like that's incredible work by the fighters, because they're the fittest, the strongest, most best prepared fighters that we have, like going out there. So a lot of that is down to me, yes, because I'm the coach, yeah, of course. Like, but like it's also down to the rest of our judo community, because whenever my guys enter able-sighted competitions, they fight, like, and people give them the respect that they try to beat them, like, and that's great. That's exactly what we want. So I think judo itself has just given us like this real good platform for disabled people. I mean, our adaptive team, who is not right now, is not in the Paralympic Games. So our adaptive team are fantastic. Like, and the people that run the adaptive team are unbelievable. They give all their time and all their effort into that, and that could be that there's a whole range of disabilities in there. And I have a really close relationship with them because a lot of my Paralympic guys go through that pathway to go into adaptive teams and stuff like that. So next weekend they're going out to Venray in Holland. The adaptive team are fighting out there. The Paralympic team, the Parapotential team are fighting out there as well at the same time. So, like, they're all there supporting each other. So,
I have to say, I think a lot of what you talk about, you know, you're a very modest guy, and you don't realise perhaps that you know your sport and the culture that you have is a shining light to others and other organisations. As we've been talking, I've been jotting down some of the kind of key messages, the take-home messages for other organisations, because as Adam says, the organisation's a great example. It's offering a blueprint to follow, but it's about, if I can kind of summarise a little bit, so I'm conscious of time, but it's about working with each other, not against each other. You talk about swimming in the same direction. It shouldn't matter whether you have a disability or not. It shouldn't matter what your workplace is, whether it's sport specific or not, but actually moving in the same direction together, and not, it doesn't matter whether a disability is present or not. Not being afraid to make mistakes. I think that there often is the case that line managers can fear saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing with a disabled person, but actually having open, honest, frank, candid conversations helps a lot. Normally, in my experience, disabled people are the expert of their own conditions and are able to share with you, how to support them. And we need to not be afraid. It needs to not be a taboo to talk about these things. Fully supporting our people to be the best they can be, whether it's an Olympian, whether it's a Paralympian, whether it's somebody working in a supermarket, an office, in education, in the NHS. At times, disabled people might need adjustments. But not all the time, and it's about recognising when there's that need and talking openly about that, but also, you know, appreciating that disability is just one of multiple identities normally. About creating that culture where the default is inclusion, rather than seeing that as something exceptional. It'd be great if what you have at judo became the rule rather than the exception. Thinking about this affirmation model, not patronizing disabled people, you know, but actually looking to empower and support and champion them. It's about respect and trust. And it's about learning from disabled people who often have unique skills and abilities. They can be adaptable, they can be resourceful, they have great teamwork. They're masters of their craft. These Paralympic guys, they are masters of their craft. There's a lot they can share, pushing in the same direction and allowing disabled people to be leaders, because otherwise we risk a lot of purple talent being wasted. The government have this desire to get 1 million disabled people, 1 million more disabled people in work by 2027. We must reduce that disability employment gap. And speaking about, you know, allowing people to be authentic, creating a safe space where people can be themselves, and you know, things always being, you know, you're always on a journey. You know, it's not perfect, but being prepared to be on that journey is really, really important. So thank you so much, Ian, for sparing your time, sat in the student accommodation at Warsaw whilst I'm enjoying sitting on my sofa in Adams at home. I think that speaks there about the commitment that you have to your craft. There's been some messages come through on the chat. If anybody feels that, you know, they haven't had a chance to ask something they would like to ask, or they want to follow up, I'll put my email in the chat again. You're welcome to contact me, and I can always pass on information to Adam or to Ian if there is something you want to follow up on. Somebody had asked a question at the start, but I can't see it now, around a recruitment program at British Judo and whether there was going to be an equivalent for the visually impaired one, as well as a sight. If you can perhaps just comment on that quickly.
Yeah, it's nice to see. I can see. I recognise some of their names as well. Rowan was on there, but I recognise Rowan and Rob as well. Is that the GB Judo community? I think that's the GBJC. Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that we've done, the biggest thing that the realization I had, right? I was in Rio. I won't bore you with this massive story. I was in Rio. It was my first go at Paralympic Games. We got 3 medal matches. We lost all 3 medal matches. That's 3 fifth places, and it absolutely destroyed me, like inside out. I remember being in the village, just looking out, thinking, "Oh my God!" Like that's the first time British Judo has never won a Paralympic medal, and I was mortified with it. And I remember thinking to myself, "Okay, what do I need to do?" Well, first and foremost, I need to get more athletes. That's what I need to do. So I need to be really open. I need to make sure that I give myself out to more people. And so I've tried my best to be as open to the wider community, to get more judo people, more visually impaired people doing judo, so as I could get the advantage of it. I still haven't got an MBE yet, so what I do get is I get the first cuddle when they come off from the medal matches. When you see at the Paralympic Games, in the last 2 Paralympic Games, I remember being in Rio thinking to myself, that'll never happen again. Like we will not do that again. I'll make sure that I get those hugs after every event. And what we've managed to do is build up a community of people now that talk to each other a lot, and means that visually impaired people, disabled people can interact in the sport that I love. I love my sport so much, and I didn't get everything I wanted out of it from my competitive career, but now I'm managing to do what I wanted to do via my coaching career. And I think, like, yeah, what I need to do, yeah, get lost. What I need to do is I need to keep that work going, because I'm not going to be here forever. Like, it's impossible to think that. I mean, I've been here 10 years already, which is probably one of the longest serving Paralympic coaches, barring Steve Pullen, who did it right from the beginning with no money and no infrastructure, no nothing. But yeah, so now I need to make sure that the infrastructure is right, so as the next coaches have the same passion that I have for developing judo athletes. And if they're visually impaired, they're visually impaired. If they're not, they're not. So yeah,
Brilliant.
I think that's the best way of putting it.
Thank you, Ian. I've thoroughly enjoyed spending the last hour and a quarter, hour and a half with you. It's been
Cool.
a real insight, and there's messages coming in saying what great insight it's been into visually impaired judo and into what it's like to be part of an elite program. So appreciate to everybody that's attended this webinar. We'll look forward to doing another webinar again in the future. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.